Commission resumes. I understand that the evidence leaders have received a communication from Advocate Jelly. Is that correct, Mr. Madlala?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that they won't be here and that they will not be continuing with the cross-examination of the General. The letter does say that they reserve the right, they may or may not apply for the General to be recalled. Thank you, Chairman.
When we adjourned yesterday, after we adjourned yesterday, Ms. Jelly and Ms. Hardy came to see me to tell me that they'd overlooked that Advocate Jelly would not be available this morning. They indicated they would not cross-examine this witness further. What was put to me was that inasmuch as what he was going to deal with, the questions they were going to ask, which would have taken about 5 minutes or so, another witness can deal with it, so they were proposing to ask that other witness those questions. But of course that doesn't mean that Mr. Semenya will be prevented from re-examining on the topic that was raised if he considers it appropriate. Very well. Who is going to cross-examine next?
With your leave, I will be, Chair.
Leave not required, but granted nevertheless.
Kuthiwa ke Advocate Jele akekho namhlanje babhale incwadi besithi into basoze babe khona ngoko abazokwazi ukuqhubekeka ngokubuza imibuzo apha kunjengele ngeso sizathu eso ukuba kuzobakho imfuneko uxesha elizayo into bafuna into bazi abuye abazombuza imibuzo bazothetha into enjalo kanye xa bengafuni ukuthi bambize izinto bebezambuza zona bazawuzibuza amanqina azawuza kwixesha elizayo.
You are cross-examining on behalf of AMCU, are you?
I am cross-examining on behalf of AMCU. Good morning, General.
Goeiemôre.
I'd like to start with a question that you were asked by the chairperson in your evidence in chief, and the answer that you gave. The question was the following: how many operations of this magnitude, where people have been armed, have you been involved in? You recall that question from the chairperson?
Uyakhumbula ixesha sihlala kubuza umbuzo into bana ke ngoku kwiphulo lamapolisa elalifana nolu apho abantu babexhobe khona uye wathatha inxaxheba wena amaxesha abangaphi na usawukhumbula lo mbuzo?
Voorsitter.
I do remember, Chairperson.
Isawukhumbula.
And your answer was the following: I personally have never been involved in an operation of this nature where so many are armed, and in my whole career I have never known of something like this where so many are armed. You recall giving that evidence?
Usakhumbula impendulo oyithethileyo into ba ebomini bakho wena bonke nje wenza umsebenzi wopolisa zange kusebenze kwiphulo lamapolisa apho kwakukho abantu abexhobe bebaninzi ngalendlela babebaninzi ngayo pha usayikhumbula loo nto leyo?
Correct, Voorsitter.
Correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
Now, you haven't been a member of any POP unit post-1994, is that correct?
Phambi konyaka wa-1994 zange emva konyaka ka-1994 zange kube lulungu le-POP kunjalo?
Voorsitter, ek was nie 'n lid van 'n enige openbare orde eenheid in my totale loopbaan nie.
In my whole career, Mr. Chairperson, I have not been a member of any public order.
Emsebenzini wami wobupolisa ke ebomini bami bonke zange ngibe lulungu le-POP.
And so you obviously don't regard yourself as an expert in public order policing.
Ngoko ke awuzithathi njengencutshe apha ke kwizinto zomsebenzi we-POP?
Nee.
No.
Hayi.
In your evidence in this commission, you've said that the operation at Marikana was not strictly a POP operation, but was something broader. You recall that?
Usakhumbula ngokutya kobungqina busithi ke ngoku le nto yayisenzeka phaa eMarikana yayingasiliphulo le-POP kuphela kodwa yayinto ephangaleleyo kunaleyo usakhumbula?
Dis correct, Voorsitter.
It's correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
And you've also in your evidence referred to it as a hybrid operation, because you said it was not only the POP unit that was present, but also other units. Is that correct?
Uye wathi ke ngoku into ethe yakhetheka ngoba yayingasiliphulo le-POP kodwa liyalibandakanya namanye amacandelo amapolisa ayikhumbula loo nto?
Ja, nie net eenvoudig oor die teenwoordigheid van ander eenhede nie, maar in terme van die situasie wat hom afgespeel het.
Not only in terms of the presence of the other units, but the situation that was taking place there.
Hayi kuphela ngobukho bamacandelo amanye kodwa ngenxa yemeko yayilapho.
Sorry, I didn't hear the interpreter's translation. I didn't hear your translation. Could you repeat it,
Not
please?
only because of the presence of the other units, but the situation as it was occurring there.
But nevertheless, the operation at Marikana remained under POP command. Is that correct?
Ofike yona imeko yayilapho eMarikana yayingaphansi kolawulo lePOP kunjalo?
In terme van die uiteendryf aksie was die verantwoordelikheid van openbare orde.
In terms of the dispersal action, yes, that was the responsibility of the POP.
Ewe ke ngoku apha kunyathelo lokuchitha abantu yayimsebenzi wePOP lowo.
No, the overall commander was General Mpembe, who was a POP person, and therefore the overall command of the operation was POP. Is that correct?
Inkumande engamele apho yayinjeneral Mpembe ngamanye amazwi eliphulo lapho yayiliphulo lePOP kunjalo?
Generaal Mpembe is nie verbonde aan openbare orde polisieering nie.
General Mbembe is not attached to the public order policing.
Akakho icandelo ke lePOP uGeneral Mpembe.
Now, in the last 18 years, since the advent of democracy, there have in fact been a large number of operations, POP operations, that have dealt successfully with very large numbers of armed people that have been armed with both traditional weapons and with firearms, and in some cases where the police have in fact been fired at. Are you not aware of any such operations?
Kuye kwenzeka kwixesha elidlule apho kubekho uqhankqalazo apho iPOP iye yathatha inxaxheba khona abantu babexhobe ngezixhobo ke ezingozenzele kwakunye nemiphu apho amapolisa edutyulwa khona. Awunalwazi ngento lolo hlobo?
Voorsitter, ek myself en die bevelstruktuur by Marikana was nie bewus van 'n soortgelyke operasie wat soveel mense sodanig gewapen was nie.
Me personally, Chairperson, and the commanders at Marikana were not aware of any operation of that nature where so many people were armed.
Such an extent.
Said Sudanig
Sudanig to
armed
people,
in such a manner.
People who were armed to such an extent.
Mna ke nenkumande zaziphaya eMarikana sinalwazi ke ukunge qhankqalazo lolu hlobo apho abantu babexhobe ngalandlela abaya babexhobe ngayo.
Voorsitter, en daardeur sê ek net daar was nie ander gevalle wat mense nie gewapen was of selfs vuurwapens gehad het nie.
By so saying, Chairperson, I'm not saying that there were no protests where people were armed
Even with firearms.
and even with firearms.
Ngokuthetha lento ndithethayo ke andithi zange kubekho uqhankqalazo apho abantu babexhobe bephethe nemipu.
Well, let me give you two examples, General, of incidents that have happened since '94. To deal with the first example, I need to introduce as a new exhibit a document which is entitled Iris Report Number 110973, if that could perhaps be handed out at this stage.
It's called IRIS, I-R-I-S.
That's right.
IRIS report number
00973.
973. That will be exhibit triple. Thank you. Exhibit triple G 38.
Thank you, Chair.
Uzawuza ke ngoku usinika uxwebhu.
Before you proceed, I must tell you that we did say, we gave a ruling really, that in future, when documents are going to be relied on, notice should be given them beforehand, and copies should be distributed beforehand, so that not only the witness, but also the members of the Commission can read them and but I don't think you were here when I said that, so for your future reference, I repeat what I said in that regard. Do we need to read the whole document? Perhaps we do.
We
Perhaps
do,
we can
we do,
wait
Chair.
for 2 minutes and read it before you proceed. You don't read it loud, just read it silently.
I was planning to read the document into the record. Would that be?
So you were?
Yes.
Oh, well, if you do read the record, then we can listen to you reading it.
Yes.
Chair, can I, before Ms. Barnes, Chair, may I, before Ms. Barnes reads the document in the record, to register our objection? This IRIS document is not identical, the information contained in it is not identical to the official IRIS document in relation to the matters it handles. As a matter of record, this document is very sensitive information which to access requires a registered user to have it. It requires a parcel number, an access code and passwords to access. And I asked Ms. Barnes how did they gain access to it. She tells us that it is accessed by a non-SAPS member, and I don't know how that is possible. But most significant, the information is inaccurate.
Objecting to my receiving the document as an exhibit, I numbered it, but of course that's provisional. If you can persuade me that it shouldn't be received, then we'll cancel that. Are you objecting to
the use of the document?
The use of the document. Ms. Barnes, you've heard what Mr. Semenya says. I think you should answer the points that he makes.
Unengxaki ngalento yena ke ngoku-advocate Semenya ngokuba kuthiwa le nto iqulathwe kweli xwebhu ayiyonyani, ayibhalwanga ngobunjalo bayo kwaye nendlela efumaneke ngayo ngoba kaloku kuthiwa nalo mntu uze nolu xwebhu olu luthetha ngeento zamapolisa
Answer, can you tell us what
akalilopolisa.
IRIS is? It's an
Chair-
acronym of some kind, obviously.
I'm not sure what it stands for, Chair, but it's a police database which records all POP incidents. It's not a secret database. It's a record that POP keeps of every POP incident that happens, how
So
many
the
protesters
answer
are
is
there,
it's
how
a-
many police are present, and so forth.
Sorry, the answer is it's a police database. What it's an acronym for, you don't know, but that's not really relevant. So what do you say in regard to Mr. Semenya's objection to our receiving this exhibit and your basing cross-examination upon it?
Well, Chair, this information was received. The information contained in this document, as well as the document that's going to follow, from Monique Marks, who is an associate professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, who has done a lot of work in the area of public order policing, has accompanied police officials on a number of operations. And so the summaries of these two incidents are obtained from Monique Marks, and we will call her in order to confirm these incidents if necessary, if these incidents are disputed.
Document, then, is it a document drawn up by Professor Marks?
It is,
Based
based
upon-
on the IRIS report.
Yes, I see. So this doesn't purport to be an extract from the official IRIS record, as it were, but her summary of an incident which has this classification number with IRIS.
That's correct. And she can give evidence and confirm that. In relation to the second document that I'm going to introduce, she in fact witnessed the events that she summarized directly. So she can speak to both these documents and to their authenticity, the authenticity of the facts.
Into ethethwa ke ngokuthiwa ke ngokolu xwebhu libhalwe yinjingalwazi yakwaZulu Natal University nguMonique Marks ke lowo kuthiwa waye ke hambe namapolisa wakhaphe ngokunolwazi ngezo zinto ezo nangona athe yena ngokubhala kwakhe washwankathela izinto bezifumana kuloo ngxelo ke ibizwa i-IRIS apho into zepop zibhalwa khona kodwa kuthiwa angaze abazonika ubungqina aze utsho uba nyhani ezinto zinjalo.
Chair. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Semenya?
Well, from the response, we can deduce two things. One, that Ms. Barnes says this is not an IRIS document. Secondly,
This is apparently a statement, as I understand her, this is a statement by Professor Marks.
But the second point we can make is that it is not an extract of an IRIS document either. Then we must make the objection that unless we are told that Monique Marks can speak to the veracity of the information contained in that document, it can't be used.
And that would probably require a statement from Monique Marks as well about the background to this whole incident.
Yes, of course, that point, this is anticipatory. The point you make may well apply to this document, but from what Ms. Barnes says, doesn't relate to the next one, where Professor Marks is going to testify as to something that she knows about from her own knowledge. The problem would be, in the case of the second one, would be that, of course, we haven't got a statement yet, affidavit, according to the procedural rules we laid down in the Commission. But I'm not sure that that would necessarily be fatal. But anyway, Ms. Barnes, you've heard what Mr. Semenya says.
Yes, Chair. The intention was never to call Monique Marks as an expert in relation to, or to give her opinion on the Marikana operation generally, but simply to confirm these incidents.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's not an expert statement, because an expert statement contains opinions. If she is merely giving a statement as to what she knows herself, facts that she's aware of herself, then it wouldn't be an expert statement, but it still would be a statement, which in terms of the rules we laid down, should have been filed beforehand so people could prepare and that kind of thing. But you don't have to address me on the question of whether it's an expert statement. I accept it isn't. But the further problems arise.
Kuthethwa ke into ukuba ke uko ayoncishe yena ke uku kodwa kuthiwa indlela esetyenziswayo ke apha ke kwi-commission into yokuba xa umntu uzawubizwa belinqina qala uyanantsika kufuneka kufunyanwe i-statement sakhe.
Those who are as curious as I was about what IRIS stands for, I'm informed it stands for Incident Registration and Information System. So that at least we now know. So this document that you put in, or sought to put in, relates to a particular incident which is duly recorded on that system. But you still have the
Chair,
objections
yes.
to deal with.
In relation to the first document, the document that has the IRIS report number at the top, Monique Marks can testify as to how she obtained this information and produced the summary. In relation to the second document, she was actually an eyewitness in respect of the operation. It was in fact more than one. It was a series of operations described in the second document, and there she was in fact an eyewitness. I think that's as far as I can take it, Chair.
Ms. Barnes, surely you would need an affidavit from Ms. Marks, Professor Marks, if you were going to follow this route.
Well, the idea would be that she would come to the Commission and she would give evidence.
No, but that's not the point we put to you. In order to, we hoped to expedite matters. We laid down a procedure that evidence that's going to be led should be dealt with in affidavits. Notice should be given to the attention to lead the witness, and the affidavit should be filed beforehand. So that when cross-examination proceeds, the cross-examiner can say, witness number so-and-so, whose statement was already filed, says this, what do you say about it? Now, that procedure obviously not being followed here. That's the point that's being raised. I understand your point, she can come and give evidence, but strictly speaking, in terms of our rules that we've introduced in order to try to shorten proceedings, there is this difficulty.
Chair, I understand that. The difficult, they only came into we were only able to get this information quite recently, and that's why this has happened. But I cannot see the prejudice, Chair, to the parties if this summary is confirmed. I can tell the Commission that Professor Marks will come and confirm the contents of the summary under oath.
Bayixelelwa ke ngemiqathango yalapha ekhaya into abaqala funeka uluke intetho yakhe egunyazisiweyo kuziwe nayo kuzofundwa qala uthi yena akaboni uba loo nto iza kwenza undonakele ngokuba naye lo unjingalwazi uzawukwazi uba makaze apha azozingqina ezo zinto ezo kodwa yona ngxaki ngoku inkulu into yoba kuthiwa kulandelwa miqathango.
Chair, in respect of the second document,
the second document, and then I'll ask Mr. Madlanga to give us
If I may,
his
Chair.
assistance. Yes, certainly.
Regarding the second document, it is impossible that these could be facts known to Professor Marx, even talking about approximately 50 murders. There's no way he could or she could have personal knowledge of these facts. So it's not even a statement of factual account by an individual if you look at the content of the document.
Naxa ibala ke befunda oluxwebhu yena umhlekazi uMenya uthi lento bazokuthetha kakhona ngabantu ngamashumi 50 abathi basweleka into ibingenakwazi ukuba mayenzeke leyo ingakumbi ke xa izothetha ngendlela athe wafumana ngalo oluxwebhu lesibini athetha ngalo usina councillor Semenya.
This, Ms. Barnes, this incident which is dealt with in the document appears, according to the document, took place on the 4th of March 1996 during the daytime in what I take it is the Durban CBD. So some at least of the facts would almost be in the public domain. I'm not sure whether all the details in this document are in the public domain. This matter might have been covered in newspaper reports, even television news broadcasts. But then there are matters, however, which follow from paragraph 6 and 7, I think, which presumably aren't in the public domain. But anyway, let's hear what Mr. Madlanga says, and then you can respond to it all. Mr. Madlanga?
Chair, may I...
Sorry, Mr. Smith, sorry, you're still busy. I beg your pardon.
Sorry, Chair.
Forgive me.
Even the date of the incident is wrong. So would be very interested to know, because according to official records, it was the 4th of May when that incident happened.
Kodwa nomhlakile ubhaliweyo idate ayiyo ngoba kaloku yayingasiyifo kaMatshi kodwa yayiyifo yakaMeyi apho lento athetha ngayo kuthiwa yenzeka khona.
Mr. Madlanga?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, you would have noticed that when the debate commenced, I was not here, so to an extent I'm blindsided, as it were. Let me just address one aspect, the question of compliance with the rules on deadlines or regarding deadlines. As I understand it, Ms. Barnes says that the information only came to their notice fairly recently. I understand the thrust of what she is saying to, in essence, be seeking condonation. Much as one would like to see strict compliance with the rules of the Commission, those are by no means hard and fast to the extent that there would be no condonation. So to that extent, I would say, based on the explanation that she gives, that perhaps condonation should be granted. But I do not seek to address the issues that Mr. Semenya is raising as to the merits and demerits of why the documents should or should not be admitted, aside of the question of compliance with the rules. Thank you, Commissioner.
Advocate Madlanga into yokuba uyayiqonda bafuneka ulandela imiqathango kwaye kunexesha elisikiweyo apho izinto funeka ufakwe khona kodwa njembetshilo kodwa yena uadvocate apha akukudala ifumene longxeleleyo kodwa ke nangona ikho imiqathango ayinombophelela ngolu hlobo ngokuba uchazile kwaye ingcaciso yakhe iyavakala ngokucela into yoba anikwe phofu ke elo thuba into yoba akwazi ukuthi nangona engezawungena kwizinto ke eziqulethwe kolu xwebhu athetha ngalo ke ngoku yena uadvocate Semenya.
But perhaps I can short-circuit this at this stage. It seems to me that this material, if there's substance in it, is the kind of material which you would wish to put before the Commission, and whether there are procedural things that should be done, they could be done, and the material could be put before the Commission if relevant at a later stage. Because I don't want to hamper you in the presentation of your case. But let me ask the Major General this. Major General, the material that Ms. Barnes wishes to cross-examine you about relates to an incident which, according to Mr. Semenya, took place in the CBD in Durban on the 4th of May 1996. Do you know anything about that incident yourself? Because if you don't, then you can't deal with it anyway.
Oluxwebhu ke uMiss Barnes afuna ukubuza ngalo kuthiwa kungesiganeko esenzeka phaa kumbindi wedolophu yaseDurban ngo-4 kaMeyi 1996. Unolwazi ngaloo nto leyo?
Chairperson, prior to this report, no, sir.
Ngaphambi kwale ngxelo ke bendingazi loo nto leyo.
Perhaps, Chair, then we could see if the General knows anything about the incident described in the second summary, which I don't think has yet been handed out.
Anything out here, but just give him the date and the place of the incident. And if he doesn't know anything about that either, then you'll have to reserve your, what one can perhaps call your fire, for later witnesses. And perhaps before you do that, you could have an affidavit filed in accordance with the rules, so that the kind of procedural problems that we have discussed will be avoided. But give him the date and place of the second incident. Let's see whether he can help us about that.
Kuthiwa makamsixelele kuqala ngomhla kunye nendawo kwenzeka kuyo ngoba ufuna ke ngoku ukuzama uba kungenzeki le nto okubana ke ngoku abantu bangafaki ngoku intetho yomntu egunyazisiweyo ozawuzabela ingqina apha kule commission.
The second incident, it's in fact a series of incidents. It's described by Professor Marx as the Gleeblands Hostel operations. The Gleeblands Hostel is situated in KwaZulu-Natal, and POP, Public Order Policing, together with a number of other units, were stationed there for an extended period of time in order to deal with faction fighting. Do you know anything about that?
So you haven't given us the dates, the period over which
the period, I apologize. It was in fact from 1998 to 2001 that these operations went on.
Uthetha ke ngoku lesibini lithetha ngeziganeko ezenzeka phaa kwinkomponi eyayilapho ke ngoku apho kwakubandakanyeka icandelo elopop kunye nabanye apho kwakho umlo idabi.
About those incidents and the lessons, if any, that we learned therefrom?
Unolwazi ke ngezo ziganeko ezo okanye kukho nezifundo nathi nazifunda ngezo zinto ezo?
Voorsitter, ek het die naam Gleeblands Hostel die eerste keer gesien in terme van 'n dokument wat versprei was oor dokumente wat ek ondervraag sal word. Ek is nie bewus van sodanige insidente nie. Ek weet ook nie hoeveel insidente dit was oor die 4 jaar nie.
I am not aware of the incidents, how many took place in these 4 years. Ms. Chairperson, I only became aware of the name Gleeblands as a result of documents that were given to me. Before that, I did not know anything.
Ngekuko andinalwazi ke ngezo ziganeko ezathi zenzeka kulo minyaka mine apho ke ngokwenkomponi kwaye ndiqala ukwazi ngalo Gleebland leyo emva uba ndinikwe olu xwebhu.
It does seem as if this isn't the witness to whom these questions can be asked, but that doesn't mean that if there's evidential material here which will help us to come to conclusions in dealing with our terms of reference, that you will be prevented from presenting that evidence at the appropriate time and asking questions of witnesses who can give meaningful answers.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
But
General,
so before we carry on, I take it I must delete the reference to Exhibit G 38, and we must reserve that designation for some other document at some later stage.
That would be in order, Chair.
Lo mibuzo ke uyayibuza amangqina afanelekileyo hayi ke elengqina engathi ke uyamvala okanye uyamnqanda ngamanye amazwi.
General, I'm sure I can ask you, though, about the IRIS database. We, as the attorneys, well, specifically the attorneys for AMCU and also the attorneys for the families, have made requests many weeks ago for a number of IRIS records in relation to POP operations. Would those requests go through your office?
Ms. Bond, let's get on record what exactly the system is, so that your questions then become more meaningful in the context. So, are you aware of a registration system which has the acronym IRIS, which stands, so I'm informed, for Incident Registration and Information System. Are you aware of that registration and information system?
Uyabuza uba unolwazi ke ukungalanda apho kubhalwa khona iziganeko eze-POPs ezenzekayo ezibizwa le nto ebizwa kubhalwa kuyo i-IRIS na?
Voorsitter, ek is bewus daarvan, dit is 'n insidentregistrasie inligtingstelsel, 'n stelsel wat gebruik word om openbare orde insidente elektronies op rekord te plaas.
I am aware of this, Chairperson. It is a document where POP incidents systems are being registered.
Uthi ke unolwazi ngaloo nto leyo indlela ke izinto ze-POP ezobuxhakaxhaka apho kuye kufakwe okanye kubhalwe kugcinwe zonke izehlo neziganeko ze-POPs.
If I may explain further, it's an electronic system in which POP incidents are being registered.
And requests for specific IRIS records, would those requests go through your office?
Ke izicelo ke apho kucelwa khona ke amaxwebhu e-IRIS ezo nto ziye zidlule kwi-ofisi yenu na?
Voorsitter, in my kantoor het ek 'n offisier wat toegang tot die stelsel het.
In my office, I have an officer that has got access to the system.
Phaa eofisini yam ke likhona ilungu elikwazi ukuba likwazi ukusebenzisa ke yona loo system leyo.
Maar die afdeling wat die stelsel bedryf is nie in my kantoor nie.
But the division that drives the system is not situated in my office.
Kodwa ke iofisi yam ke ayi lelo candelo elisebenza ngobobuxhakaxhaka.
Would you agree with me, General, that those records would not be secret? If we requested those records, they would be made available to us. Is that correct?
Uvumela nam ke into ba ukuba sicela zona ezo rekhodi loo nto ayisoze ibe lihlebo sizazinikwa xa sisicela. Kunjalo?
Voorsitter, nee, ek weet nie. Ek self het nie toegang tot die stelsel nie. Wat ek weet is jy moet pertinent geregistreer word op die stelsel nadat jy opgelei is. So ek weet nie wat die sekuriteitsklassifikasie en ek weet ook daar's prosedures in terme van om enige dokumentasie te bekom deur die polisie. So ek kan regtig nie onvoorwaardelik antwoord nie.
I personally have no knowledge. I know a person has got to be registered in order to have access to these documents. The procedures I am not aware. I don't know.
Into endiyaziyo ke into yokuba umuntu ofuna ukufumana izinto zofuneka ube ngumuntu obhalisiwe kodwa indlela abasebenza ngayo ke andiyazi.
Also said, as I
I
understand,
personally do not have access.
no, he also said he doesn't know what level of security clearance one has to have to gain access. I think that's what he said. Is
I'm
that
sorry,
right?
I omitted that, yes.
Yes, you did.
He mentioned that there's security clearance attached to it. I don't know at what level it is.
As ek net verder kan meld, voorsitter, dat en ek weet nie hoe dit die navraag gedoen nie.
I also don't know how this inquiry was made, Chairperson.
Maar daar sal of met 'n IRIS nommer wees of daar sal 'n pertinente datum en besonderhede moet wees want ons registreer sekerlik so in die omgewing van 10 tot 12,000 IRIS verslae per jaar.
We register annually in the region of between 10 and 12,000 IRIS incidents per annum. There should be an IRIS number accompanying with a date.
With a date or a date. For
Date,
example,
IRIS number or a date.
if, for example, Ms. Barnes' clients want information about this incident that apparently on the 4th of May 1996 in the CBD in Durban, that information would be enough to, subject to the security aspects that we don't know the answers to. That information would be enough to assist those who are in charge of IRIS to identify the particular incident. Is that correct?
Ke ngoxa sithetha ngale nto ke athetha ngayo umama lo uMiss Barnes xa befuna izinto umzekelo ngesiganeko esenzeka phaa eDurban ngo-4 kaMeyi 1996 ke aba bezokhuseleko ke ngoku bazokwazi into yoba loo nto bakwazi uyibona okanye bayifumane ngokukhawuleza xa kwenzeka ngolo hlobo.
Voorsitter, ja, dit sal maklik wees, maar by bekommernis as ons verwys van 'n tydperk 98 tot 2001 kan dit dan potensieel, as ons nie spesifieke datums het nie, kan dit potensieel 30,000 ja 30,000 verslaaf wees.
That would be, Mr. Chairperson, but if it is not date like it is in this case, in the 4 years, we would then be talking of about 30,000 such reports in the register.
Xa ingenamhla ke idate nje bakubhalwa apha ke ngoku xa kuthethwa ngeminyaka emi-4 singathi ke ngoku izinto ezingangezenzo okanye eziyi-30,000
which would make it problematic.
kwaye xa injalo iyawusinika ingxaki.
General, I can assure you that our requests are very specific. Would you be able to find out for us and let us know on Monday whether the documentation that we seek is in fact secret?
Ms. Barnes, I think you could possibly get that information from Mr. Semenya. I don't know, we should lay on the witness the duty to get the information. But can I ask you a question? There was a book published by the Institute of Race Relations some years ago, written by Anthea Jeffrey, dealing with the various incidents in what were described as the killing fields of KwaZulu-Natal. Do you know whether that book deals with the, amongst other things, with the incidents to which you refer? Because there's quite a lot of material in that book, as far as I can recall, about a whole series of incidents. But I don't know whether it's relevant at all to the point you're now dealing with. But if it is, it might be of assistance.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We will look into that.
Ayibuzwa ke ngoku bebuza umbuzo into yoba uyake wayifunda incwadi ebhalwe ngomnye umbhali apho wayethetha phaa ngento ezasenzeka ngokubulawa kwithafa ke ngoku phaa kumadaba eKwaZulu-Natal wathi ke uzayijonga ke loo nto leyo yena.
We'd just like to find out from the witness whether he can tell us who it is that would be responsible for attending to our requests for the IRIS documentation.
I don't want to stop you asking the witness a question, but isn't that something you can address to Mr. Semenya during the tea time? I understand you want the information, you want to know to whom you must apply, but I don't know, this is the witness's function to give you that information. Mr. Semenya will be able to, I'm sure. Is that right?
Chair.
Yeah, the difficulty is that we've written these letters, we've made these requests weeks ago, and we do not get answers. And I'm told this morning by Mr. Semenya that IRIS is now a secret database. So I believe, with respect, that I'm entitled to ask this witness, these documents we believe are very important for the Commission to arrive at the truth in this matter. They are extremely relevant. And I believe that I'm entitled to ask the witness whether the database is secret and who is responsible for answering our requests.
I don't want to interrupt you unduly, but the witness has said he's not directly concerned. He just has one of his officers who has access to it. It's obviously run by somebody else. Let's find out first, under which of your colleagues in the top bestuur, the sort of top management of the SAPS, does this particular register fall?
Ke ngoku kwabaphathi abanezikhundla eziphezulu phaya ebupoliseni oogxa bakho singathi ke kulo msebenzi wezinto zilohlobo zingaphantsi ngubani osebenza ngaso.
Or is that a question I was also asked Mr. Semenya to give him the information?
Kanye ndibuza umhlekazi uSimenya ibe nguye ondiphendulayo.
Chairperson, as far as I know, all our police systems, and we have more than 100 different systems, the custodian would be Technology Management Services, a division. In terms of the operational functioning of the system, I'm not 100% sure, but it might be with a Brigadier Kumalu in a section that is operations, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Semenya will be able to get the information, I'm sure. Is that right, Mr. Semenya?
Indeed, I will, Chair. Just for the record, though, I did not say to Ms. Barnes that the information is secret. I think I would understand constitutionally what that would connote. And even before the Commission, I just said access to this information is through this method. I never purported to say it was secret.
Yes, thank you. I don't know that we have to inquire into that in any detail. The fact of the matter is that information, certainly some information, can be obtained by Ms. Barnes' clients if they follow the correct channels, and you will enlighten her as to what those channels are, so that the information, so far as it helps us in the Commission, will be able to be put before us.
Indeed, Chair.
Uyatsho ke na uadvocate uSimenya into yoba ewe zingafumaneka izinto azifunayo uadvocate Barnes kodwa uba uzawulandela ke ngoku imiqathango.
That deal with your problem, Ms. Barnes.
Thank you, Chair.
Phendulekile ke naye uMiss Barnes.
General, if you could please go to Exhibit SS3. These pages are unfortunately not numbered. But if you could go to the document that is entitled Operation Platinum, the 14th of August 2012, and if you could go to the second page of that document.
I can just confirm, is that the heading background, and
That's
then underneath there's one geographical orientation?
That's correct. I'd like you to look at the slide entitled Background. You see it says rival mine worker unions, NUM and AMCU. It then says recent aggressive history, Saturday the 11th of August 2012, unions clash 2 dead. You see that?
uyabona babhalwe khona ke ngoku into yobani ke ngoku ezi union ke ngoku amkho ezinongquzulwana ke ngoku uthi ke ngoku nezinto ezazisenzeka ngaphambili lapho kwakho izidubedube khona yonke le nto ibhalwe phaa uyayibona na?
I do.
Ewe ndiyayibona.
So is it correct then that on the 14th of August 2012, the SAPs believed that 2 people had been killed in the altercation outside the NUM office on Saturday the 11th of August?
Inyani nayo into yokubana ke ngoku ngolwangquzulwano oluphakathi kweofisi yenum nabaqhankqalazi nge-14 August amapolisa akholelwa into yoba bona nabo kwaye kwasweleka abantu ababini kule nto yayisenzeka apho.
Dit was die aanvanklike informasie het ons so geglo, dis reg.
That was the original information that we received, yes, that is correct.
Yaba yinto ke ngoku ngela xesha esayivayo nathi kunjalo.
Where did you get the information from?
Ulwazi lohlobo into enjalo nani xelelwa ngubani?
Ek dink dit was gedeeltelik deur meneer Sinclair oorgedra van Lonmin.
I think it was partly from Mr. Sinclair from Lonmin.
Ndicinga uba omnye wabo yaba ngumhlekazi uSinclair waseLonmin.
Ons het die aanvanklike oorsig het ons die maandag aand gekry deur die toeligting vanaf hulle.
The briefing was only received on the Monday following.
Ingxelo ke ngoku yenziwa ke ngomvulo.
If you carry on in that document to your plan for the 15th of August 2012, it starts Operation Platinum with that date. And then similarly on the second page, there's a slide entitled Background where you are still, you have the same information in that slide. You see that?
Uyayibona le ndawo ke ngoku athetha ngayo?
Dis korrek, voorsitter.
Correct, Chairperson, yes.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
You know, of course, that this information was false, that it was not the case that 2 people had been killed on Saturday, the 11th of August.
Uyayazi nokuba iyonyani leyo into yokuba abantu ngomgqibelo ke apho umhla we-14 August ukuba baye basweleka babulawa.
Dis korrek, slegs 2 persone gewond.
That's correct, yes. Only 2 people were injured.
Inyani leyo kuba kwangcwelegeka kuphela abantu ababini.
If you could go now to Exhibit L, to slide 6.
Singayo kolwa xwebhu ke ngoku libizwa u-L lamapolisa phaa ku-slide 6.
Do you have that in front of you?
Ek het dit, voorsitter.
I do have it, Chairperson.
You'll see it says Friday, the 10th of August 2012, protesters wounded 2 persons during clash of rival unions. You see that?
Ek sien dit.
I say that, yes.
Ewe ndiyayibona.
Now, where did you get that information from?
Leyo na ke naniyifumana nixelwa ngubani niyithatha phi?
Ek het nie die informasie bekom nie.
I did not acquire that information.
Mina zange ndifumane ulwazi olunjalo.
Do you know where the SAPs got that information from?
Amapolisa uyazi into yoba ke ngoku ilwazi okanye ingxelo enjalo bayifumana phi?
Voorsitter, nee, dit blyk dat dit moet gereflekteer word onder Saterdag die 11de Augustus.
Chairperson, it should have been reflected as on the 11th of August.
No, General, that's not correct. There were, in fact, 2 people wounded on Friday, the 10th of August, but that statement is still incorrect in certain other respects, and I'll explain to you how that is so now.
Uthe nyani ngoba ke ngoku abantu baye ababini ke ngoku bonzakala bafumana ukonzakala ndizakuxelela ba utheni le ndiyithethayo ke ngoku ndithetha le ndiyithethayo.
If you could go to exhibit XX2 to page 80 thereof.
Sifuna ke ngoku ubungqina obubizwa uXX2.
Page 80.
Voorsitter, my bladsye onder XX2 is nie almal genommer nie, slegs bladsye wat verwysend is na 'n voorvalleboek wat bygehou was deur Lonmin. As ek nie kan weet onder watse dokument.
General, I think you might find a paginated number in the top.
On references to occurrence book register.
You might find a paginated number in the top left-hand corner of the page.
Page 80. I only have numbers on the top right-hand corner, small numbers.
Ndibona phe ngaphezulu apha ngasekunene kubhaliwe kuphela ngamanani amancinci.
Perhaps identified by the date of the incident, that might assist.
Yes, it's the Marikana case 6908-2012. It's a docket. If you could, is your page 81 numbered? Do you have it?
If you look at that exhibit XX2, you will see that it's got 94 pages. Your pages may not be numbered. This is 14 from the end.
81.
From the end. There's 94 altogether, so if you look back 15 pages, you'll find it.
I have a page 80 and a page 81.
Thank you. Now, this is a docket, as I've indicated. You see that?
Idocket le uyayibona uthi uyayibona ke ngoku unjengele.
This specific document is a statement by Mr. Mutengwani, who was one of the people that was shot on Friday, the 10th of August, 2012.
Ke intetho ke statement ekwidocket esenziwa ngumhlekazi lo khanganyiweyo apha owathi wadutyulwa ngomhla we-10 ka-August.
And this is part of the attempted murder docket in relation to that shooting. Do you see that?
Ke ngoku idocket ke ngoku le yetyala lokuzama ukubulala le uyayibona nto leyo?
What I see is Marikana case 69. I do not know what is the specific charge. If I just look at this, if I go to the crime docket, it says Marikana 69, person shot, attempted murder ×2. Yes.
Othi ke bengayibona iqala uba isimangalo ntoni kodwa ibona i-cast number yayo uba yintoni kuthiwa ke ngoku ibiza izimangalo ezimbini ke ngoku zokuzama ukubulala ezo umuntu edutyuliwe apho.
Now, this is the statement by Mr. Mutengwani, and I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs to you. If you could start at the 3rd paragraph on page 80. He says, on Friday, the 10th of August 2012, at about 6:15, I was walking towards Inkaneng, passing Wonderkorp Stadium, when one of the Lonmin security twin cab opened fire at me. The cab is yellow with light on top.
Uthi ke ngoku ngolesihlanu ke ngoku kwakungumhla we-10 ka-Agasti 2012 kwakungomkhono emva kwentsimbi yesithandathu ndandihamba ndisiya ngasenkani ndidlula kwistadium se-Wonderkorp apho ke ngoku nogada ababini babekhwele ke ngoku ivan leyo ibizwa i-double cab baye bandubula ke ngoku uthi ke ngoku ivan leyo yayimthubi kwaye yayinesibane apha ngaphezulu.
He actually indicated 18:15, so it would be PM, and then he indicated open fired at us, not at me.
Ke ngoku uyatsho kwixesha yayimkhona emva kwentsimbi yesithandathu loo nto yayithetha into yoba ke ngoku kwakungokuhlwa ngoko kwaye uthi wasidubula akathi mna ndadutyulwa.
Yes, that does seem to be us. Thank you, General. The next
Enkosi.
paragraph reads as follows. On the bakkie there were white men, and I looked back to see what is happening, but I was shot on my left thigh and fell down, injuring my forehead. The other guy I was walking with was also shot.
Uthi ke ngoku phaa ke ngoku uveni leyo kwakukho amadoda amhlophe uthi ndajonga ngasemva kuba kwenzeka ntoni kodwa ndadutyulwa ethangeni lam apha ke ngoku ngasekhohlo ndawa phantsi ndonzakala ibunzi. Uthi ke enye indoda endandihamba nayo yadutyulwa nayo.
Note that, Chairperson.
Ivile loo nto.
And then if you go on to page 81, the next page, this is a statement by Mr. Dlormo, who is the other person that was shot on that day. And I'd like to refer you to the fourth paragraph on that page. It reads as follows. I only heard plus minus 5 shots shooting from the crowd of people who were there or from the Lonman security. And I found myself on the ground and I found myself in the hospital and I was shooted on the head by unknown person. Do you see that?
Uthi ke undava izithonga ezinhlanu ke ukudutywa phaa kwizihlwele abantu ke ngokuba bephaa kwinogada besecurity ngonogada besecurity uthi ndazifumana ke ngoku sendiphantsi mna ngelo xesha uthi ke wazibona emva koko sesibhedlele uthi ndadutyulwa ngumntu ongaziwayo ukuba ngubani lo mntu lowo.
I do, Chairperson.
Ndiyibonile.
So the one person is alleging that they were shot by Lonman security. The other person says that he doesn't know whether he was shot by Lonman security or by somebody else.
Lowo qala ke
Isn't
ngoku
that
uyatsho uba
correct?
udutyulwe ngonogada ke ngoku base Lonmin. Lo wesibini ke uthi ke ngoku akaqinisekanga uba udutyulwe ngabo okanye ngomnye umntu ongomnye na. Kunjalo?
That's correct.
Kunjalo.
So those statements in that docket do not accord with what is stated on slide 6 of the police presentation, Exhibit L. Isn't that correct?
Ezinto zithethwa apha kwezi-statements kwezidoketa zihambiselani ke ngoku nale nto phaa ku L6 phaa kuxwebhu lamapolisa kunjalo?
Voorsitter, as dit die pertinente verwysing is in slide 6, dan is dit nie in lyn dat daar 'n konflik tussen twee enies was nie, dis korrek.
It is correct in that if this is a reference to slide 6, that there's no reference to a conflict between two unions.
Ewe inyani le ngokuba ke ngoku ethi into inye xa ujonga phaa ku-L6 akho apho kuthethwa kakhona ngeemanyano ezimbini.
It's also not clear from at least both of those statements that those people were wounded by protesters, is it?
Ayicacanga ke nakule nto ibhalwe apha into yokuba abantu aba bathi bonzakaliswa ke ngabaqhankqalazi kunjalo?
Voorsitter, weer eens as dit verwysend is na die twee verklaringe wat voorgehou is, dan is dit nie deur protesteerders aldus die weergawe van die twee verklaarders nie.
If this is with reference again to the two statements that were read, it does not go with what is in slide 6.
Ukuba ke ngokubhekiswa kwezinto zimbini zibhalwe kwezi statements zimbini nyani ke ayihambisani okanye ayithethi into inye nale ilapha ke ngokuluxwebhu lamapolisa u-L.
Now, during the week of the 9th to the 16th of August 2012, were you aware that at least one Lonman employee, or perhaps let's just call him a civilian, claimed to have been shot by Lonman security? Were you aware of that?
Ukusukela ngala mhla we-9 yojonga 16 ka-Agasti bunolwazi lunokuba bekukho umntu ke ngoku owathi yena udutyuliwe apha ngonogada baselonmini?
Voorsitter, ek was bewus van Lonman sekuriteit wat rubber gebruik het pertinent in terme van 'n aantal voorvalle.
I was aware of one Lonmin security who used rubber in certain incidents.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Fanas. I'm appearing on behalf of Lonman. We'd appreciate if my learned friend Ms. Barn would give us details. She talks about one Lonman security shooting people. If you could perhaps just give details to General Annandale as to who this person is.
I'm sorry, she's referring, as I understood it, to what's said in the statement, which is at page 80 of Exhibit XX2. So in the context, if I'm wrong, she'll correct me. Am I right?
Yes, Chair. And just to be clear, I wasn't sure.
In that statement, in that affidavit, I think it's an affidavit, made by the complainant who was shot, he alleges that he was shot by a London security. The person in the next one, page 81, says he was shot either by people from a crowd or London security. He's not sure which. So I think, to be fair, in the context, she's given enough information for you to identify it. But if there's more information you require to enable you to identify it, please say so, and I'm sure she'll be happy to oblige.
If it's the same person, then I'm satisfied, Mr. Commissioner.
Person, is it, Ms. Barnes?
Yes, it is. And just to be absolutely clear, paragraph 2 of the statement says, I'm an adult male with ID number, and he gives it, 28 years old, living at Nkaneng and employed at Safi Shaft. So he is indeed a Lonman employer, and his full details are set out there.
I think your problem is you don't appear to have Exhibit XX2. You have it in front of you now.
Got it in front of me, Mr. Commissioner.
Electronically. All right. Okay. So you can then follow the cross.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Esephendulile ke ukuyena u General Ndokubana ube nolwazi ke ngonokata omnye besebenza imbumbulu zerapha kwiziganeko ezithile kanye zehlo ezithile ezazilapho.
So to go back to your previous answer then, General, you weren't aware then that a Lonman employee claimed to have been shot by live ammunition by Lonman security during that week?
Bungenalwazi lokuba ke ngumsebenzi waselolmini owathi pha kulo vehicle wadutyulwa ngonogada baselolmini ngembumbulu zentsimbi.
Nee, voorsitter.
No chance.
Hayi sihlalo.
If you could go now to your statement, please, Exhibit G1, to paragraph 6.
Siya ku paragraph 6 we statement osenzileyo wena.
Are you at paragraph 6?
Ujenge kuyo ke le paragraph yesithandathu.
I am indeed.
Ewe, ndijongile kuyo.
And there you say, during the briefing of the National Commissioner, it was mentioned that the employees of Lonman Mine, allegedly belonging to AMCU, a competitor to NUM, started striking on Thursday, the 9th of August, 2012, with regard to a wage dispute. You see that?
Uyabona phe ngokubhalwe ke ngokwingxelo eyinikwa uCommissioner jikelele ke ngokwathiwa ke ngokuba abasebenzi baselolmini abayi ngabalungu eAMCU yile ikhuphisana kunye neNUM baqala ke ngoqhankqalazo ngomhla we9 kaAgasti 2012 beqhankqalazela imivuzo uyayibona lonto?
I do, Chairperson.
Ndiyayibona silalo.
And this is a reference to the briefing meeting with Lonman on the evening of Monday, the 13th of August 2012. Is that correct?
Le ingxelo ke ukuya kuthwa ngabaselolmini ngomvulo kwakungomhla wo13 kaAgasti 2012 kunjalo?
That is correct.
Kunjalo?
That's correct, Chairperson.
And during that meeting, Lonman told you that this was an AMCU strike. Is that correct?
Kulo ntlanganiso naxelwa ngabaselolmini bawuluqhankqalazo ke leliqhankqalazo leAMCU kunjalo?
Voorsitter, ek sien my vorige paragraaf verwys ek na die toelichting wat gedoen was aan die nasionale commissaris.
In my previous paragraph, Chairperson, I made during my briefing to the National Commissioner.
En dit was tydens hierdie, daar was ook 'n briefing deur Lonman geweest, maar dit is tydens hierdie toelichting aan die nasionale commissaris.
There was also a briefing by Lonman, but it was during this briefing to the to the National Commissioner.
Khona ke ingxelo yayinikwa ke kungabaselolmini kwaye nami ndake ndayikhupha ingxelo ke apho kodwa ikhona le ngxelo ke ndayikhupha kuCommissioner jikelele.
Yes, but to be clear, paragraph 6, you're referring to the briefing by Lonman. You got the information relating to it being an AMCU strike from Lonman. Is that right?
Ke ngoku le ngxelo ke ngoku uthetha ngayo yayisenziwa nguwe uthetha ke ngezinto ezazivela phaa kwabaselonmini kunjalo.
Voorsitter, maar in 5 verwys ek na beide. Ek verwys na die aanvanklike toeligting en dan verwys ek na die briefing from Lonman en dan het ek afgesluit om te sê die National Commission was briefed on the deployment. So ek verwys in die vorige paragraaf na al die kollektiewe toeligtings.
Here, in reading in both in 5, I'm referring to both these incidents, the briefing and the deployment.
Apha ke ngoku kule paragraph ndithetha ngezinto ezimbini ngengxelo kwakunye nokuthunyelwa kwamalungu kwindawo le wathunyelwa kuyo.
I think Ms. Barnes' point is that the statement you make in para 6, that it was mentioned that the employees of Lonman belonging to AMCU had started striking, and that in the next paragraph there's a suggestion also, that's what you say. That obviously was part of the briefing which the National Commissioner got from Lonman, because the briefing she got from the police members themselves apparently related to the deployment. And what is dealt with in 6 wasn't a briefing in relation to the deployment, but it was the history and reasons for the strike, which was from Lonman. I think that's her point. And I take it you'd agree with that.
Dis reg, voorsitter.
That's correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
If you could go back, General, please, to Exhibit SS3, to the same slide that we were at just a few minutes ago, the background slide.
Basingaya phako khona ku SS3.
I do have the slide.
When disiphethe ke slide eso.
And just below the point that we dealt with earlier regarding the incorrect information as to the deaths on the Saturday, it says Sunday the 12th of August, AMCU and security clash, and then Monday the 13th of August, AMCU and SAPS clash. 2 police officials dead, 1 critically wounded, 3 AMCU dead, 5 wounded. You see that?
Uyabona ke ngoku apho kuthethwa khona kubhalwe into yokubana apho kwakungecawa kwabakho ungquzulwano olukhona ngaphakathi konogada kunye ne-AMCU kwaze ngemini endayo apho kwakunge-13 kwabakho ungquzulwano phakathi kwabantu be-AMCU namapolisa. Uyayibona leyo?
Dis reg, ek sien dit, voorsitter.
That's correct, I said, Chairperson.
Ewe inyani ndiyayibona.
So as far as the police were concerned, this was an AMCU strike. This is what you'd been told by Lonman. Is that correct?
Into enayixelwa ngilonmini into yoba kaloku yayiluqhankqalazo lwe-AMCU olu kunjalo.
Voorsitter, dit is ons het aanvanklik gehad het dat dit meestal AMCU lede is.
Originally, yes, the information received that it was mostly AMCU members.
Into esayivayo ke ekuqaleni into yokuba uninzi lwabantu yayingamalungu e-AMCU.
Voorsitter, en dan die voorval op die 13de, dit was na aanleiding van terugvoer dat die lede wie gesterf het AMCU lede is.
The information contained on the 13th was information that the people died were members of AMCU.
Ingxelo sayifumana nge-13 into yokuba ke ngoku abantu abaswelekayo yayingamalungu e-AMCU.
Where did you get that information from?
Nani ifumana phi into enjalo ingxelo enjalo?
Voorsitter, waarskynlik deur generaal Mpembe, ek is nie seker nie.
Probably by General Mpembe, I'm not quite sure of
Weet
this.
nie of dit dalk deur meneer Sinclair was of later deur meneer Botes nie, ek is nie
Don't
seker
know
nie.
whether it was in Sinclair or later Mr. Botes.
Andiqinisekanga kodwa yayingathi uGeneral Mpembe okanye mhlawumbi umhlekazi uSinclair emva kwexesha yaba ngumhlekazi uBotas.
If you could go to Exhibit L, to slide 8.
Basingaye ke ngoku kwiphepha ke ngoku elinesibhozo apha ke ngoku uxwebhu lwamapolisa u-L.
Here it is stated, information showed that the unrest was based on the rivalry between NUM and AMCU. Is that correct?
Ke ngoku ingxelo yafumanekayo into yokuba ke ngoku into yayisenza uba kubekho ke ngoku isiphithiphithi apha kwakungenxa yokujongana kwezikhondo zamehlo kwe-AMCU kunye ne-NUM kunjalo?
Dis korrek.
That's correct.
Kunjalo.
And as far as you were concerned, a major cause of the strike and the unrest was the rivalry between AMCU and NUM.
Indlela obusazi ngayo into yoba ubunobangela ke woluqhankqalazo kwakungenxa yokujongana kwezikhonto zamehlo kweNUM kunye neAMCU kunjalo?
Voorsitter, dis een van die pertinente redes.
One of the pertinent reasons, Mr. Chairperson, yes.
Ewe yayinye izizathu eso.
And where did you receive this information from?
Ingxelo enjalo nayo nifumana phi?
Voorsitter, dit kan 'n kombinasie wees van inligting deur ons misdaadintelligensie
Could have been a
terugvoer vanaf Lonmin,
combination of information received from our intelligence, Lonmin,
inligting wat tot beskikking was die mense van Noordwes pertinent
Information.
Generaal Pembe en Brigadier Kalitz wie
that was available given by the people from the Northwest, General Pembe and Brigadier Kalitz.
Binoba into yayivela phaa kwabaselonmini kunye ke neentloli ezi kwakunye ke nephaku brigadier ke uGeneral Mpembe no Brigadier Kalitz
wie al van voorheen voor my aankoms al betrokke was.
Who were involved already before my being there.
abo ke babesebengenelele bona phambi bana ndiye apho.
And we know that we've already referred to the briefing that you had with Lonman on Monday, the 13th of August. We know that one of the things, well, the evidence that has been led is that one of the things Lonman said was that they were not aware of the identity of the strikers. They said that they were faceless people, and indeed they said that they weren't even certain that they were employees of Lonman. Is that correct?
Uthi ke ngonto yayivayo phaa ngomvulo nge-13 August into ababaselomini bathi abaqinisekanga nokuba ngabantu ngamalungu abo okanye abantu abo kunjalo?
Correct, pertinent soos oorgedra en gereflekteer deur Generaal Mpembe.
Correct, as briefed as carried over to us by General Mpembe.
Ewe injalo ke ngokwengxelo esayifumana phaa kuGeneral Mpembe.
And we know that on the Wednesday, the 15th of August 2012, General Mpembe had a meeting with the two unions, AMCU and NUM. Other than that meeting, there was no meeting held by SAPS with either of the unions during that week. Is that correct?
Siyazi into yoba ke uGeneral Mpembe phaa ngolwesithathu nge-15 waba nentlanganiso kunye neenkokheli ze-AMCU neNUM kodwa ke amapolisa wona phaa kuloo veki apho kuloo veki zange ke abe nentlanganiso neNUM neAMCU kunjalo?
Take it you mean with the two unions together? Because
Yes,
there was
that's
evidence
correct.
of some, at least one meeting before he arrived with the NUM leaders on the Sunday. But so you mean meeting with the two unions together, apart from the Wednesday one, there was no other. That's the question.
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Into ayithethayo into yoba ngaphandle kwentlanganiso yayingolwesithathu zange kubekho enye intlanganiso kakhona apho.
Voorsitter, ek is net bewus van die 2 uur 14 uur vergadering op die 15de en dan die aandsin wat ons afsonderlik met eers NUM en toe AMCU vergader het.
I'm aware of the 1400 hours meeting with the two chairperson and later separate meetings with AMCU and NUM.
Ndinolwazi ngale 15 yayingentsimbi yesibini ke ngoku emini meqanda kwakunye nenye ehlukile kuye banjwe kunye neNUM.
Barnes, when it's convenient, we can take the adjournment, but you tell me when it's convenient for you.
Yes, if I could just get clarity on that answer, please. If you could repeat the answer, please, General.
Chairperson, I said that I'm aware of the 14 hours meeting on the 15th, the Wednesday, that General Mpembe attended with NUM and AMCU as well as Lonman. And then the meeting later that same evening, where there was a separate meeting between SAPS, Lonman and NUM, and then SAPS, Lonman and AMCU.
Into endiyaziyo ke ngalamhla wa-15 ile intlanganiso yayingentsimbi yesibini apho ke ngoku amaqela eAMCU neNUM babekhona kunye nabaselonmini kwabakho enye ke ngoku intlanganiso ebanjwa ecaleni neAMCU enye yabanjwa kunye neNUM.
Thank you. This would be a convenient time, Chair.
Take the tea adjournment at this time.
Sisayophunga sizawuphinda sibuye xa sigqibele ukuphunga.
And senior management, not with the South African Police Service officers at all.
I made the statement. You're correct. I was wrong. He telephoned someone in the department, but he didn't actually meet the police.
That is correct.
I was wrong. No, thank you for correcting me.
If I may just add the sequence, then it will be entirely clear. After the meeting with Lonman, Mr. Zokwana thought that more needed to be done. He telephoned the provincial commissioner's office. He didn't speak to her, but felt that he had received no real satisfaction. He then spoke to the minister. Thank you, Chair.
This is evidence. I had incorrectly remembered it, but thank you for correcting me. On that note, can we proceed, Ms. Barnes?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. If I could just put it to you, General, that the correct position then appears to be, if you could just confirm this for us as far as you're aware, that the SAPs, other than the meeting that General Mpembe had on the Wednesday afternoon with the two unions, the SAPs had no meetings, either with the two unions jointly or with them separately during the week of the 9th to the 16th.
Into ayithetha ke ngoku uthi ke ngoku kula veki leyo kuzange kubekho intlanganiso eyabaphakathi kwamapolisa kwakunye ke ngoku nezimanyano zabasebenzi ezimbini ngaloo veki leyo.
Voorsitter, ek is nie bewus van enige ander vergaderings dan die twee wat ek vermeld het nie.
I am not aware of any other meetings, Chairperson, save the two that have already mentioned.
Akho enye intlanganiso nolwazi ngayo ngaphandle kwezimbini bendisendithethe ngazo.
If you could go now, please, General, to Exhibit RR1. This is a founding affidavit in support of an application for an interdict brought by Lonman on the 10th of August 2012.
Kuthiwa sisicelo ke ngoku apho ke ngoku babesicela umyolelo wenkundla befuna izithintelo khona bonaba baselonmini ngo-August ngomnyaka 2012.
Die document, voorsitter.
I have the document, Chairperson.
You'll see on the first page, it's paginated page 134. You'll see that the parties are the particular Lonman mines that are described as first applicant and second applicant. In fact, there are quite a few errors on this page. It's first applicant, and then below that it says third applicant, but it should really be second. And then you'll see that the respondents are NUM as first respondent, AMCU as, again, it's described as third, but it should be second. And then you'll see that the third to further respondents are the people whose names are listed in Annexure A. You see that?
Uyabona ke xa ujonga uxwebhu ke ngoku abafaka isicelo ke ngoku ubhalwe apha yayingabaselonmini kodwa ababeyokuphendula bona apho kule nto yayisenziwa isicelo yayingabasenum ne-AMCU okwesithathu nabantu abakhankanyiweyo apho. Uyayibona loo nto?
I do, Chairperson.
If you could go then to paragraph 8 of the founding affidavit. This says, as I've just said, that the third to further respondents are listed in Annexure A. It says they're all employees of the applicants, 3,000 employees. It says the third to further respondents are participating in an unprotected strike in breach of the provisions of Section 64 of the LRA. And it then goes on to say the third to further respondents are making unreasonable demands, which primarily center upon a demand for a basic wage increase to 12,500. Do you see that?
Yabona ke ngoku apha uchazwa khona ke ngoku aba ke ngoku besithathu ndabona bavela apho kuthiwa ke ngoku ngabasebenzi okanye abasebenzi abasebenzela lo ufake isicelo apho abasebenzi abangamawaka amathathu uyatsho ke ngoku ngaba bathe bangena ke ngoku kuqhankqalazo ongakho semthethweni uyachaza babafuna into engakunokwazi bakufikelele kuyo umvuzo ongange 12,500 ngenyanga. Uyayibona loo nto?
I do, Chairperson.
Uyayibona sihlalo?
And then on page 139, paginated page 139, paragraph 19, Lonman says the industrial action in this matter involves all of the applicants' rock drill operators who are key to the production process. You see that?
Uyabona ke ngoku apha ke ngoku kuboniswa ke ngoku lento iquka ke ngoku abasebenzi ababizwa i-RTO aba bantu badlala indima enkulu ke ngoku xa kusenziwa ke imveliso le yabo.
I do, Chairperson.
Uyayibona sihlalo?
So what Lonman is saying on Friday, the 10th of August, in its founding affidavit, is that it knows who is on strike. The people on strike are all its rock drill operators, and it in fact sets out their names in an annexure. Agreed?
Uyavumelana mntaba ngolesihlanu ke lo we-10 zika-Agasti ilonmini yatsho uba iyayazi uba ngoobani abantu bazi-RTO kwaye abhaliwe namagama abo. Uvumelana kuloo nto leyo?
Ek lees ja dan die persone wat vermeld word in 'n aanhangsel is dan die betrokke rock drill operators.
I mark that the people who are mentioned in the annexure are the rock drill operators.
Ndibonile uba abantu ababhaliweyo apha ke ngoku kolu xwebhu ngaba babizwa yi-RTO.
That's correct. In paragraph 19, Lonman says they're the rock drill operators, and in paragraph 8, it says those are the people that are on an unprotected strike.
Apha ke ngoku qaleni kuthiwa kule ndawo abantu abo zi-RTO, kodwa ke apha kwenye paragraph engaphambili kuthiwa ngabo bantu ke ngoku bathe bazibandakanya noqhankqalazo ongekho semthethweni.
Kennis.
And you
Take
agree
note.
with me that Lonman would have been aware of the union membership of its employees?
Ke ngoku uyabona into yoba lolmini le inolwazi ke ukuba abantu abasebenzelayo bangamalungu eziphi imanyano.
Ek aanvaar dit is die geval.
I accept it is the position, yes.
Ndiyayamkela ukuba injalo yona.
What happened was that when this commission commenced, the attorneys for AMCU asked Lonman to indicate what the union membership was of the list of 3,000 people that we've just referred to as at the 10th of August, 2012. You follow?
Uyalandela ke ngoku njengoba ndisithi kwakuthiwe bacela basilolmini uba bazotsho bakwabantu bangamathathu yayi ngabemanyano okanye imanyano yabasebenzi eyiphi na.
Do chairperson.
Ndiyalandela.
Lonman provided that information, and that information is contained in another exhibit, which is 0019.
Baye baza noxwebhu olunjalo baselolmini ke ngoku luxwebhu olubizwa apha u-0019.
Do you have that in front of you?
Uluphethe luxwebhu phambi kwakho.
All 100 and it seems like about 20 pages.
Ingathi ke inamaphepha ngamashumi amabini. 120
Plus.
sangaphezulu.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I said 120 plus pages.
Yeah. So that's the Annexure A that was attached, it's been reproduced, the Annexure A that was attached to the founding affidavit, and the membership of the employees is now indicated. You see that?
Babhalile ke ngoku apha kulu xwebhu into ba aba bantu bangamalungu eyiphi imibutho. Uyayibona loo nto?
I do, chairperson.
Ndiyayibona sihlalo.
We've done the calculation, and Mr. Matunjwa led evidence about it in his testimony. The overall membership on the basis of this document is 35% AMCU and 55% NUM.
Njengoba wanika ubungqina bakhe naye ke umhlekazi uMathunjwa saye sababala abantu sabona ke uninzi lwabo ngabantu benum kodwa ke ubuncinci ngabantu beAMCU.
Chair, before the witness responds to that, this is a matter that has been debated on 2 occasions previously, this particular calculation. And it has become manifest that it cannot be relied on as an accurate guide of the percentages in respect of the union memberships.
Yes, I understand that. I'm not sure that Ms. Barnes is interested so much in the percentages.
Well, she's just read them out, Chair.
No, I'm aware. All right, please, Karen, let me not interrupt you, Karen.
The point is that this is an annexure that is attached to an urgent application for an interdict, and it sets out its employment profile. You'll recall that Mr. Gegeleza, who testified here, he was a rock drill operator. His name appears on the schedule. Was a NUM member and appears as such. He testified that he most certainly wasn't part of any industrial action. And Mr. Zitilele gave evidence that a good many people, when confronted with a strike situation, do not participate in the strike, but they also, for various reasons, do not attend work. So this must be put with respect to the general on a fair basis, and not to suggest that those are percentages upon which any subsequent answer can be properly founded.
Yeah, I only referred to the union membership. I don't seek to rely on the document to indicate who was actually participating in the strike or not. Obviously, one cannot know that with absolute certainty at this stage, but I simply seek to rely on it to establish what the union membership was at that date, and that information has been provided by Lonman at our request.
Uthi ke afuna ukwazi ke kaqiniseke into yokuba ilungu ubani ilungu lomphumbutho kodwa ke into afuna ujongisisa yile into ba ke lesicelo kwakhona babesenzile elonmini basifumana ekubeni babefake isicelo sabo.
Do you need the percentages? Because if you study the affidavit you're looking at, you will see that in para 6 of the affidavit, it said that some of the third to further respondents are members of the first respondent, that's NUM. And in 7 it says the majority of the third to further respondents are members of the second respondent, that's AMCU. And then in 30, it is said that the applicants require the first and second respondents' members to act in accordance with their contractual obligations, etc. So Lonman's case from the very beginning was some of them are AMCU, some are NUM. The application is aimed against members of both unions. Your point, as I understand it, is that some of the information in Exhibit L doesn't seem to reflect that properly and seems still to be influenced by the information that Lonman originally gave to the police. Do I understand you correctly?
Yes, Chair, but with respect, what Lonman says at paragraph 7, the majority of the third to further respondents or AMCU members, that is not correct based on Annexure 0019.
Numbers again?
35% AMCU and 55% NUM. But even if one leaves those percentages, if one sits and counts the union membership figures that Lonman has given to us, it is not majority AMCU. And therefore, the statement in paragraph 7 is incorrect, and that's what I want to put to this witness.
Okay. I will allow you to continue, but I would ask you to bear this in mind, that this witness wasn't concerned with that aspect of the matter. That was something you may remember that General Mpembe dealt with when he spoke to Lonman. But insofar as you wish to put it to this witness, I take it's for a fairly limited purpose. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, just put it for that purpose and then let's carry on.
So, well, General, if you accept what I've told you about Exhibit 0019, and you accept that if you count the numbers there, that the majority of the employees listed on that document are in fact NUM members, then you will agree with me that the statement in paragraph 7 of the founding affidavit is incorrect.
Ms. Barnes, I mean, it's not for him to say whether it's incorrect or not true. The facts are before us. It's for us to decide. He's not the commissioner. He doesn't have to make findings in that regard. And whatever he says is something that we won't pay much attention to, because it's not a matter that falls within his area of competence or experience. So you've made your point. I suggest you move on. The London Council, do you want to say something?
I think you've put it rather eloquently, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know about the eloquence, but I did put the point as I saw it. Thank you.
With respect, you're quite correct. I don't follow why the General's been cross-examined on these issues.
If Mr. Berger were here, Mr. Berger would put with considerably more eloquence than I have at my command the point I was trying to convey to you. But I'm not stopping you from making the point, but I don't think this is the person to whom you should make the point. You put the basic facts before us, and perhaps we can move on without unduly hampering you in your position.
I have made my point, and I'm happy to move on, Chair. General, in your cross-examination by Advocate Budlander on the 25th of April 2012, there was an exchange between you during which Advocate Budlander asked you certain questions about meetings that Lonman had had with RDOs. I'd like to refer you to that portion of your evidence.
What page is it on, Ms. Brown?
It is on page 8544 of the transcript. It's day 80.
ufuna umbuza ke ngoku ngezinto ayizibuzwa ngu-advocate Bucklander ngomhla we-25 ka-April 2013 ngeli xesha wayembuza ngentlanganiso yayiphakathi kwe-Lonmin kunye ne-RDO.
So it's at line 7 of that page. I have an English version in front of me, but essentially Advocate Bucklander is asking you whether you were aware that before these events, Lonmin management met with the representatives of rock drill operators on a number of occasions. And you then say, I'm aware of meetings. And, excuse me, Advocate Bucklander then says, are you aware that the purpose of those meetings was to discuss the amount which the rock drill operators are paid and a possible increase in that amount? And you then say, Chair, and you must just tell me if this is correct, because I have an English translation. Chair, I was aware that there was an agreement that they would receive a certain amount. I don't know if the amount they demanded, and then there was an increase, so I don't have particulars of the discussions. Is that correct?
Ngeli xesha ubuzwa ke ngoku ngeli xesha ubuza ngentlanganiso u-Advocate Bucklander ezazi phakathi kwe-RDO ngeli xesha badibana izihlandlo ezininzi nabaselonmini bethetha ngezinto zemiba yemali, wathi ke wena unalo ulwazi lwento elolo hlobo inyani leyo?
Dit is correct, voorzitter.
It's correct, Chairperson.
Njalo sihlalo.
So I take it then you are not aware, and you were not made aware of who Lonmin met with as far as rock drill operators were concerned and what the particulars of the discussions were. Is that correct?
Ndizawuthi ke bungena ulwazi loba ngobani abantu be-RDO badibana kunye nabaselonmini kwaye wawungazi noba phofu babexoxa kanye bethetha ngantoni, inyani leyo?
Dit is correct, voorzitter.
It's correct, Chairperson.
Njalo sihlalo.
So would it be correct then that you were never informed that Lonmin had in fact met with 5 rock drill operators outside the bargaining structures on 4 separate occasions in order to discuss their demand for a higher wage, and it then ultimately, Lonmin then ultimately offered them an allowance of 700 Rand per month? Were you given any of that information during the week of the 9th to the 16th of August?
La veki yena inyosho nge-16 August waxelelwa na into yokubana iLonmin ke yayidibana ke ne-RDO bengalandeli imiqathango efanelekileyo apho kuxoxwa khona, apho abantu babecela ukuba banikwe uchatha kwimivuzo yabo, apho bona bathi bazabanika imali yesibonelelo engangama-700 rand.
Voorzitter, nee, ek was nie bewus van sodanige besonderhede nie.
Chairperson, no, I wasn't aware of these particulars.
Bendingenalwazi ke ngezo zinto ezo mna.
Okay. Now, in your evidence in chief, General, you've essentially given the Commission 4 reasons why you say that the SAPs had to go into the tactical phase. I'll call it the tactical phase on the 16th of August 2012. Is that right?
Uye wathi ke ngexesha bonika ubungqina waza nezizathu ezine bakutheni ke ngoku amapolisa ayanyanzeleka angene kwizinga ke ngoku eli apho kwafuneka basebenzise bona apho ubuchule babo, kunjalo?
Voorzitter, ek het redes aangedui. Ek weet nie wat 4 was en of dit later aan aangevul is met nog redes nie, maar ek het redes gegee.
I gave reasons, yes, Mr. Chairperson, but I don't know whether it was 4 or it was additionally explained.
Perhaps it would help if I told you what they were.
Ndiyenda chaza ke ndazitsho izizathu zam, andisakho mntu bazazizathu ezine okanye ezingaphezu koko.
You've given the following 4 reasons in your evidence. Firstly, that negotiations had deadlocked.
Izizathu zakho zinazo oqala uthi indaba ke lento yokuba kube kuthethathano yayiseyiphanzile.
Secondly, that the police had been threatened.
Okwesibini amapolisa aye agrogriswa.
Thirdly, that the mood of the strikers had changed.
Nokuba ke ngoku imo yabaqhankqalazi yayiseyitshintshile.
And fourthly, you've said that not even the president of AMCU could persuade his members to lay down their arms.
Uthi ke no president lo weAMCU woyisakala ukubongoza abantu bababeke phansi isixhobo sabo.
Those are the reasons I've found in your evidence. Do you agree that that's correct?
Uvumelana mntu ba ke ngoku zizizathu ezi othe wazichaza ozithethile kubungqina bakho injalo lonto?
Voorsitter, ja, pertinent die 4 redes. Ek dink ek het later ook in my getuienis het ek verwys na die media wat die heeltyd voor tussen die stakers was, wat self gesê het dat hulle voel bedreig en dan ook vermeld dat die polisie video-operateurs was ook pertinent bedreig.
Chairperson, yes, I did give the 4 reasons, but I also added that there was also a threat on the media and also a threat on the police video operators.
Ndichazile ke zothi zine ndaphinda ndongeza ndathi kwakhona kwakugrogriswa aba ke ngokubonondaba kwakunye nalamapolisa ayisebenza ngevideo.
Voorsitter, ek het ook verwys na die verhoogde risiko in terme van sou hierdie sodanige groepe so gewapen en so groep in beweging in die nedersettings in.
I also referred to the increased threat, Mr. Chairperson, and risk of such a big armed group possibly getting into the settlement.
Ndiye ndathetha ke ngobungozi obunokwenzeka ukuba elo qela labantu abaqhankqalaza bebenohamba baye kwilokishi eyilapho.
We'll deal with all of those. I'd like to start with the 4 reasons that I indicated. But before we do that, I'd like to just examine your evidence on what Lonman's position was with regard to the strikers' demand. If I could refer you to page 8222 of the transcript.
Kukho into enza kubuza khona nokuba ke ngokwesicelo sasenzwa ngabantu yayithetha eliphi yayisithini yona iLonmin ngelo xesha.
It's day 77 and it's line 15 on that page. I'm going to read to you my English translation. I said that the total aim would be that we will negotiate in terms of finding a solution, a peaceful one at that, and that the people should be convinced to lay down their weapons, that they should not negotiate on labor issues, that they should try to convince this grouping to go back to their workstations, because Lonman indicated that once these people are back in their workstations, constructive negotiation can start through the existing channels that are in place. Is that correct?
Into ethetha noba bona bafuna kubekho ke ukusombululo soxolo kulento kwaye noba abasebenzi abathe babuyela emsebenzini ke ngoku bazawuthi bangene kwingxoxo ngemiqathango okanye ngendlela ezifanelekileyo ekufuneke kuhlalwe kwingxoxo ngayo.
That is correct, Chairperson.
Unjalo sihlalo.
And then on the 25th of April at page 8487, I'd like to refer you to that portion as well. It's day 80 and it appears at line 8.
I do have that specific page and line.
Okay.
Ndijonge kulo lo phepha.
You said the following. You said the police negotiators were continuously carrying over messages from Lonman, and we got these mostly from Khotle and Kwadi, but also feedback from Dirk Boerters from Lonman, who indicated that Lonman was totally prepared for a negotiation, but that such negotiations could not take place with people who had weapons. They asked for this message to be conveyed, that there were structures in place for negotiations and the people should return back to work. It would make the process easier. But they also said that if there was a delegation which was available, then this would facilitate the negotiations. Is that correct?
Bathethile ke ukubona into kubana ke ngoku uba bencedwa ngabantu abafanele Dirk Bottas kodwa uba ukho bathunywa abantu bengafanelekileyo babe ngabathunywa babona babeza uqhubekeka babambe ke ngoku ingxoxo kunjalo.
Voorsitter, dit klink vir my taamlik korrek vertaal.
It sounds as correctly translated, Mr. Chairperson.
Indlela evakala ngayo ingathi itolikwe kakuhle.
Reasonably, that's fine.
No, I'm happy with that, Chairperson.
Farmlik is fairly, I take it, fairly correctly.
Fairly.
As far as I could see, it is
translated.
correctly translated. But, I'm not as conversant with the nuances of Afrikaans as the Major General is.
Thanks.
Now, General, I'd like to ask you about the last line of that passage. Does that refer to a delegation being drawn from the strikers? Is that what that refers to?
Ndifuna ubuza ngale nto ibhalwa apha ke kulo mgca wokugqibela kule sivakaliso sokugqibela into yobana njengoba kuthethwa ngabathunywa kuthethwa ngabathunywa na babezawuphuma phaa kubaqhankqalazi.
Voorsitter, dit was 'n pertinente delegasie uit die stakers, dis reg?
Yes, Chairperson, it was a pertinent delegation from the strikers, that's correct.
Ewe yayingabathunywa babezawuphuma phaa kubaqhankqalazi.
So, in other words, is what you're saying here that you were told by Lonman that if there was a delegation that could be drawn out of the group of strikers, then that would facilitate the process of negotiations?
Uthi into ayixelela yilonmini into yoba uba kwakunophuma abathunywa bavela phaa ke ngoku kubaqhankqalazi ke ngoku kwakuzokwazi intona baqhubekeke ngenkqubo yabo leyo ukuba bangene kwingxoxo.
Voorsitter, ja, maar hulle het ook pertinent gesê dat dit nie sal oor loononderhandelings gaan nie.
Yes, Chairperson, but they mentioned that it would not be about wage negotiations.
Ewe inyani leyo kodwa batsho into yokuba abasoze ke baxoxe ngemivuzo.
Hulle het ook gesê dat dit deur die bestaande strukture moet plaasvind.
They also mentioned that this has got to be taken through the existing structures.
Bayichaza into yoba ke ngoku kufuneka kulandelwe inkqubo le yaziwa ilandelwayo xa kungenwa kwingxoxo.
Of dan pertinent die griewe prosedure.
Or alternatively, the grievance procedures.
Okanye inkqubo leyo bathi baveze khona izikhalazo zabo eyamkelekileyo.
So they weren't happy to negotiate about wages because of the 2-year wage agreement. Is that what they said?
Into yokuba bangene kwingxoxo zemali into eyayingabakholisi ngoba babesazi uba kunesivumelwano seminyaka emibini kunjalo.
Is correct, Voorsitter.
It's correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
But they were prepared to engage with the strikers over their grievance, provided that they came back to work and provided that this was done through the proper channels. Is that correct?
Kodwa babezimisela into yoba bangakwazi ukuthi bamamele izikhalazo zabasebenzi ukuba abasebenzi babezobuyela emsebenzini kwaye balandele imiqathango okanye indlela efanelekileyo kunjalo.
Correct, soos ek dit verstaan het, dis reg, Voorsitter.
Correct as I understood it, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, that's right.
Kunjalo injalo sihlalo.
And that's the message that the South African Police Service communicated to the strikers, that if you go back to work, this grievance of yours will be engaged with, but it must be done through the proper channels. Is that correct?
Amapolisa nawo ayodlulisa ugqithisa umyalezo njalo kubaqhankqalazi into yoba ukuba nibuyele emsebenzini le nto ke ngoku izawusombulula loo nto leyo kunjalo.
Voorsitter, ja, kolonel McIntosh sal uiteraard kan dit baie meer en meer besonderhede gee, maar dit was so die kern van dit, wapens neerlê, terugkeer werkstasies toe, dan sal prosedures in plek.
But that was the crux of the matter. But Colonel McIntosh would be able to explain this broader. The headings you touched on were some of the things.
Of course.
Yena ke umuntu ofanelekileyo ongakwazi uyichaza kakuhle le nto nguColonel McIntosh uzawuyitsho yena ngendlela iphangaleleyo.
Then he added, it amounted to this: put down the weapon, lay down the weapons, go back to work, then the appropriate structures, procedures will be in place.
Yes, those were the additional things.
Kusandothiwa kakhona into baxelwa into banke ngokuba kufuneka bazobeka phantsi izixhobo zabo bakwazi ukuthi babuyele emsebenzini.
Yes, thank you, General. I just wanted to get your understanding of the basic message, not the details. Now, that was also what was communicated, the same basic message was communicated to the strikers by Mr. Matunjwa. Is that correct?
Wayithetha into lolu hlobo nayo umhlekazi uMathunjwa phaa kubaqhankqalazi kunjalo.
Sover ek verneem was dit deel van sy boodskap, dis reg?
As far as I understood, it was part of his message, yes.
Ewe, leyo yaba yinxalenye ke yomyalezo awawugqithisa kanye bexelela abantu apho.
And with regard to, on the 15th of August now, and approaching the civilians, essentially approaching the Kopi, SAPS was concerned, or regarded itself as responsible for the safety of civilians approaching the Kopi, specifically on the 15th. Is that right?
Ngomhla we-15 ke ngokupha ngasentabeni amapolisa ekhathazekile ke ngokukhuseleko labantu abepha kwindawo yokuhlala kunjalo.
Verwysend na die presidente en hulle delegasies.
Yes, that's right.
With reference to the president and his delegation.
Thetha ke ngomongameli president lo kunye
The presidents and their delegation.
ipresident ezazihamba kunye nabanye ababengabathunywa.
It seems now I'm answering the questions. Yes, that's right.
Ewe kunjalo.
That's correct.
And this is why the SAPS insisted that those union leaders be escorted by police and that they speak from within Anyala when they address the striking crowd on the 15th, correct?
Yiloo nto ke ngoku amapolisa athi ke ngoku zona ezipresident funeka zikhathwe zikhwele phaa kwehipo kwaye naxa zithetha nabaqhankqalazi abo kunjalo.
Voorsitter, dis korrek, ja, dit was op aandrang van die polisie wat ons die delegasies gevra het om te gaan praat en pertinent noem was baie ongemaklik geweest met die veiligheidsaspek. So dit was op ons aandrang.
Chairperson, yes, the police insisted that the president go and address them. Noom was a bit reluctant. It was actually the police initiation and insistence from the police.
Ewe ya xiliniswa kakhulu loo nto nangona ke ngoku yayibonakala imadula idola nzima yona inume kwenzela loo nto leyo kodwa ekugqibeleni bathi bobongoza amapolisa bayenza loo nto leyo.
It would have been irresponsible of the SAPS not to have taken these security measures, correct?
Ukuba ke ngoku iSAPS yona engazange ithathe unyathelo olu lokhuseleko ke babeza babonisa ukungakhathali njalo loo nto.
Voorsitter, ja, ons was versigtig geweest dat sou ons op ons aandrang mense so amper wil ek sê verplig en oortuig om te gaan en daar sal 'n insident wees dan ja, sou dit onverantwoordelik wees as ons hulle sou blootstel.
We took it as our responsibility, Chairperson. It would have been irresponsible for us to insist on people going to address them and without taking the necessary measures to see to their protection, yes.
Ewe into esayixelenesayo ke ngoku into yokuba abantu ke ngoku baye apho ke ngoku ingakumbi xa sithetha ke into nokhuseleko lwabo.
And that is why Mr. Matunjwa, despite pleading to be allowed to address the strikers from outside the Nyala, was not allowed to, correct?
Yiloo nto ke ngoku nomhlekazi uMathunjwa engazange avunyelwe ukuba athethe nabantu engaphandle phaa kwehipo kunjalo.
Voorsitter, dit was die protokol wat ooreengekom is oor voordat hulle vertrek het en dit is
That
dan so.
was the protocol agreed upon, Mr. Chairperson, before their departure. It is so.
Injalo ngoba kunto yinto ekwavunyelana ngayo leyo phamba kuhanjwe apho okanye basuke kuloo ndawo babekuyo kuqala.
So let's move now to the morning of the 16th of August. It's the late morning and you are in the vicinity of the JOC, and in fact I'm going to ask you to tell me exactly where you were, but you were with the Provincial Commissioner and also with Generals Mpembe and Naidu, and Mr. Matunjwa arrived.
Utike ngomasithethe ngalantsasa umhla we-16 ngexesha phaa kujok wawunokomishina wephondo kunye noGeneral Mpembe kweli xesha ke kwaye kwafika nomhlekazi uMathunjwa kunjalo.
Dit is amper korrek, maar nie heeltemal nie, voorsitter.
It is nearly correct, but not exactly, Mr. Chairperson.
Khange yenzeke ngolo hlobo uyithetha ngalo.
Generaal Major Naidu was nie teenwoordig geweest nie.
General Naidu was not present.
Wayengekho apho yena General Naidu.
It was just General Mpembe, the Provincial Commissioner, and yourself.
Ngoko ke yayingu-provincial commissioner, i-commissioner yephondo noGeneral Mpembe kunye nawe.
Dit is korrek, voorsitter.
That is correct, sir.
Njalo Slalo.
And where exactly were you when Mr. Matunjwa arrived? Were you in the JOC? Were you outside the JOC?
Ngeli xesha ke kufika umhlekazi uMathunjwa wawuphi wena? Wawupha kujok kanye wawungaphandle?
Voorsitter, ons was buitekant die JOC fasiliteit.
We were outside the JOC facility, Mr. Chairperson.
Sasingaphandle ke kwesakhiwo esi sejok.
And Is that the place that you were referring to in your SMS to Mr. Matunjwa as the place where you normally met?
Ilinda wawubheka uthetha ngayo ke kula SMS wawuyithumela umhlekazi uMathunjwa ba indawo naniqhela ukudibanela kuyo.
Voorzitter, ek weet nie of ek normally die woord normally gebruik het of previously nie, maar ek het verwys na waar ons vroeër vergader het pertinent ons polisie en meneer Matunjwa.
Pertinently referred to the place where normally that we met the police and Mr. Matunjwa. I don't know whether I used the word normally or...
The phrase in the SMS was, SAPS is available at exactly the same spot as we had our earlier discussions.
Thank you, Chair.
Uthi into ebhalwe pha kula SMS into ba ke amapolisa afumaneka kwa kula ndawo babe kuyo.
So that place, is that the place that you were standing with the Provincial Commissioner and General Mpembe in the late morning of the 16th of August when Mr. Matunjwa first arrived?
Ndawo ke ubuthetha ngayo lena nimi kuyo wena no Provincial Commissioner kunye no General Mpembe ngelixesha kufika umhlekazi uMathunjwa.
Dit is die betrokke plek wat ons vroeër vergader het.
That is the area in question, yes, where we had met earlier.
Ewe iye ke lonke inqonye lendawo apho sasidibene khona ngaphambili.
Now, Mr. Matunjwa arrives, and there's then a conversation between him and the Provincial Commissioner, during which you are present. You refer to that conversation in paragraph 20 of your statement. Is that right?
Paragraph 20 kwintetho yakho istatement sakho uthetha ke ngengxoxo yabaphakathi komhlekazi uMathunjwa no Provincial Commissioner apho wawukhona nawe kunjalo?
Correct, Voorzitter.
Correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
And in that conversation, Mr. Matunjwa tells the Provincial Commissioner that he's been at the Lonmin offices since early that morning, and he says, but Lonmin has reneged on its promise to engage the workers on their grievance. Is that right?
Xa ethetha ke ngoku nomhlekazi uMathunjwa uxelela ke nguCommissioner wephondo into yokuba kwixesha edluleyo bepha kwiofisi selonmini kodwa ngokungathi bayarhoxa kule nto bebeyithetha bona baselonmini into yokubana ke ngoku bazawukwazi ukumamela izikhalazo zabasebenzi kunjalo?
Correct, Voorzitter.
Correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
So now, we've earlier established that the police have told the strikers that if they go back to work, Lonmin will engage with their grievance. You're now told by Mr. Matunjwa that Lonmin is no longer prepared to do that. Is that correct?
Njeba benixela ngaphambili into ba ke ngulonmini ithi ingakwazi ukuba bamkela abantu xa besiya pha emsebenzini ngoku ke uMathunjwa yena umhlekazi lo xa ebuyela kuni uthi ke ngoku yona ilonmini ayisazimiselanga ukwenza into lolu hlobo.
Chairperson, yes, in my statement I also referred, he responded by saying that he has been at the Lonmin management offices from early morning and that the Lonmin management do not want to commit to continued negotiations. And that is the reason for him not addressing the group.
Nditshilo pha kwi-paragraph leyo into yobana ke ngoku uyile nangaphambi xesha eliphambili ekuseni pha kwiofisi elonmini ngoku bona abasafuna ukuzibophelela ngokuthi bazongena ke kwingxoxo nabantu yiloo nto ke ngoku naye engafuni uba ahambe yothetha nenginginya leyo.
But you understood him to be saying that if the workers went back to work, Lonmin had reneged. They were now saying they would no longer engage with the strikers' grievance.
Wena indlolo ivengayo ingathi besithi nayo into yokuba noba abantu babuyele emsebenzini bona abasoze ke bafuna ukumamela ke ngoku izikhalazo zabantu.
Dit kan sekerlik so geïnterpreteer word as hulle nie bereid is om verder te onderhandel nie, dan kan dit sekerlik so geïnterpreteer word.
It can be interpreted that way, yes, if they were not prepared to negotiate with them further, that can be the interpretation given.
Ewe ibinochazwa ngalo hlobo into ba ke ngoku ngabanye amagama abathetha lento ugqibo yitsho ngoku.
Well, Mr. Matunjwa, in his evidence, said the following. He said, I advised the Provincial Commissioner that management had reneged on its promise to engage with the workers in relation to their grievance. That was his evidence, and that hasn't been challenged. You accept that that's what he told the Provincial Commissioner?
Ke ngoku kuthiwa utsho yena kumhlekazi uMathunjwa into yoba ndamcebise uCommissioner wephondo into yokuba abaphathi kaloku baye barhoxa kule nto babeyithethile kwaye kule nto bayithetha zange ke ngoku kubekho umntu omphikisayo umhlekazi uMathunjwa. Uyayivuma loo nto uba injalo?
Voorsitter, as hy so getuig het, ek kan nie onthou dat hy die pertinente woorde so gebruik het nie. Soos ek het geparafraseer het, dis hoe ek dit kan onthou.
I paraphrased it, Mr. Chairperson. That is how I remembered it. I don't know if he used those exact words.
Mna ndiye ndayibeka ngenye indlela ndazi noba uyithethe kanye wasebenzisa loo magama na.
But surely, General, this should have been of great concern to you. The news that you were now hearing from Mr. Matunjwa, because the South African Police Service had told the strikers that if they went back to work, they would be engaged with. They wouldn't simply be ignored, they would be engaged with. And now you're being told by Mr. Matunjwa that Lonman is no longer prepared to do that. Shouldn't that have been of great concern to you?
Zange ke ngoku inikhathaze le nto ke ngoku yayithethwa ngoba eqaleni kwathiwa ilonmini yathi abantu izawukwazi ukumamela isikhalazo zabo kodwa wafika emva kwexesha umhlekazi uMathunjwa wathi bona abaselonmini abazoyenza loo nto. Ngoku ekuveni kwakho loo nto leyo zange unikhathazeke njengamapolisa?
Voorsitter, dit was nie die fokus van die provinsiale kommissaris nie. Die fokus van die provinsiale kommissaris was gewees sy amper wil ek sê ooreenkoms, die aanduiding wat hy gee die vorige aand dat hy sal teruggaan en dat hy sou 9:00 die oggend daar wees om dan verder met die lede te oortuig om hulle wapens neer te lê.
That was not the focus of the provincial commissioner. What was said the day before was that Mathunjwa would go and talk to his people the following day to lay down their arms, and that was the focus of the provincial commissioner at the time.
Into ayiqinise kuyo ke Commissioner wephondo ngela xesha ngoba into ayijonge kakhulu yayizoba ziziphumo njengoba uthenjisiwe ngemini edlulileyo ke ngoku into yokuba abantu bazobeka phantsi izixhobo zabo ngentsimbi yethoba kusasa.
General, I'm not asking you about what the provincial commissioner said to Mr. Matunjwa. What I'm saying to you is that you, as SAPS, had given the message to the strikers that if they went back to work, they would be engaged with. Now Mr. Matunjwa is telling you that Lonman will no longer engage with them if they go back to work. Shouldn't that have been of great concern to you?
Andithethi loo nto uyithethayo mna njengele kodwa into endiyithethayo into yokuba ke ngoku nanisenthe ebantwini kaloku into yoba babuyele emsebenzini iyawudibana nabo ilonmini. Ngoku ke xa kufike yonke umhlekazi uMathunjwa ezothi yona ilonmini ithi ayisoze yona idibane kunye nabantu, loo nto zange nikhathaze?
Voorsitter, in retrospect, op daai stadium was dit nie ons fokus geweest nie, so ons het nie
In
dit was nie vir ons
retrospect-
'n pertinente bekommernis nie.
At that time, in retrospect, yes, at that time, that was not our main focus, Mr. Chairperson.
Ngela xesha ke yayingasiyinto esasisigxinenise okanye siyijongise kuyo ngela leyo.
At the end of the conversation between Mr. Matunjwa and the provincial commissioner, Mr. Matunjwa said he was going to go to the Kopi and give the workers this news. Is that correct?
Emva kwalo ngxoxo phakathi ke ngoku commissioner wephondo kunye nomhlekazi uMathunjwa wathi emva kokuzaya pha kubaqhankqalazi ndabeni awugqithisele lo myalezo, kunjalo?
Dit is korrek, voorsitter.
It is correct, Chairperson.
Kunjalo sihlalo.
Do you not think that this news would have upset the strikers?
Awucingi uba umyalezo onjalo wawunokucaphukisa ke ngoku abaqhankqalazi?
Voorsitter, ons het en die provinsiale kommissaris het in gesprek getree met meneer Matunjwa daaroor.
We did, Chairperson, and the provincial commissioner did have a discussion with Ms. Mathunjwa in connection therewith.
Sayenza loo nto kodwa ke wathetha ngaloo nto ucommissioner wephondo kunye nomhlekazi uMathunjwa.
Because the facts, General, are that these striking workers have been told for some days by both the police and Mr. Matunjwa that if they go back to work, they will be engaged with. Now Mr. Matunjwa is going to tell people that are on your version already belligerent that that is no longer the case. Were you not concerned that that would inflame the situation?
Ke ngoku njengoba abantu babesexelelwe ke ngamapolisa into yobana ke ngoku kuzokwenza kantoni kwaye noMr. Mhlekazi uMathunjwa enze njalo, waze ke ngoku wabuya umhlekazi uMathunjwa ezothetha into yoba ke ngoku umphathi okanye umqesi urhoxile kwinto beyithetha. Ucinga into yoba xa egqithisa umyalezo njalo loo nto yayizoba nefuthe yenze abantu ukuba bacaphuke?
Dit is dan juist hoekom die provinsiale kommissaris met hom in gesprek getree het, wat vir hom gesê het sy herinner hom aan sy verantwoordelikheid as 'n leier.
That is the reason the provincial commissioner had a discussion with Mr. Mathunjwa and reminded him of his responsibility as a leader.
Yiloo nto ke ngoku kwabakho ingxoxo yabaphakathi ko-commissioner wephondo umhlekazi uMathunjwa kwaye wamkhumbuza nawoxanduva lwakhe njengenkokheli.
General, shouldn't you, as a SAPS general in those circumstances, have contacted Lonman urgently and said, look, a commitment's been given that if these people go back to work, you will engage with them. We, as SABC, have given that commitment on your behalf. You cannot now renege on that commitment. Let's get this process back on track. Isn't that what you should have done?
awucingi into yoba ninento nafune niyenzile njengamapolisa ngelaa xesha ekwafuna niyenze ngokukhawuleza ukudibene nokungxama kuxela nonimi into yoba kaloku abantu bebesethenjisiwe ngokutheni ngokukhetheni nifuna ukurhoxa kuloo nto leyo awucingi uba bizoba into efanelekileyo ukuba bekufuneka niyenze lina general leyo?
Voorzitter, nee, ek het as persoon het nie in onderhandelings betrokke geraak met tussen Unis en Lonmin nie. Dit was generaal Mpembe en hy het al die sodanige skakeling gedoen.
Chairperson, I was personally not involved in any negotiations between Lonmin and Union. Person so involved was General Mpembe.
Mna ke ndandingathatha inxaxheba kwingxoxo ke kunye nolumini oyena wayithatha inxaxheba ke kanye ngenele ezo ngxoxo yenguGeneral Mpembe.
And now, not only, General, do you let Mr. Matunjwa go to this crowd of...
Before you move on to the next point, I can understand you weren't the liaison, as it were, between the police and Lonmin. But in view of the point put to you by Ms. Barnes, in retrospect, what would you say about the proposition that in retrospect one should realize, or could realize, that the appropriate thing to do would be to have asked General Mpembe then to go back to Lonmin, to say to them what Ms. Barnes has suggested should have been said. How would you react to such a proposition?
Ukuba ke ngokucetywa kanye uthiwa into yokubana ube wena bunohamba uxelele mhlawumbi uGeneral Mpembe ngoba benguye benenqubelelo kunye nolumini into yoba enze njengoba bethethile uadvocate Barnes wena bunothini ngento lolo hlobo?
Voorzitter, in retrospect verseker, die polisie moes 'n verdere poging aangewend het om dan pertinent met Lonmin te skakel oor hierdie aspek. Daar's geen twyfel daaroor nie.
There is no doubt that further attempts should have been made.
Ngokuqinisekileyo ke into yokuba bekufuneka kwenziwe eminye imizamo nemigudu into engathandabuzisiyo leyo.
At the time, was there any discussion about whether Lonmin should be approached again?
Nike naxoxa into yobana kufuneke kuphinde kubekho indibano okanye ube nendibano kunye nolomini kwakhona apho?
Voorzitter, nee, ons het nie, maar ek weet generaal Mbombo, sy het nie direk gepraat met meneer Matuna op sy eie selfoon nie. Sy het via, ek dink dit was meneer Mokoena gepraat voordat meneer Matuna gekom het. Maar ons het nie verdere gesprek gehad in terme van dit nie, nee.
We did not have further discussions about that, Commissioner. But what I know is that General Mbombo did over the phone speak to Mr. Matunjwa via Mr. Mokwena's telephone.
Khange siqhubeke sibambe ingxoxo la nto ndiyaziyo into yokuba kwabakho ingxoxo yayiphakathi ke ngoku ko-General Mbombo kwakunye nomhlekazi uMathunjwa kodwa besebenzisa umnxeba wakamhlekazi uMokwena.
Do you agree with me, at least in retrospect, General, that what ought to have happened was an attempt ought to have been made to stop Mr. Matunjwa from going to deliver this very bad news to a group of belligerent strikers without at least first making an attempt to contact Lonmin?
I understood him to say that. I understood him to make that concession in retrospect, with hindsight, I think. That's what he said. Did I understand you correctly, Major General?
Uyithethile into njalo njengele?
Voorzitter, is reg, maar ons was ook besig om te reël vir vervoer vir meneer Matunjwa.
Yes, Chairperson, but we are busy also arranging transport for Mr. Matunjwa.
Ewe, injalo sihlalo kodwa sasenza amalungiselelo into bazofumana inqwelo umhlekazi uMathunjwa.
En daar's 'n voorvalleboek inskrywing gemaak op die 16de voorvalleboek 1004 om 11:55.
There is an entry in the occurrence book at the time that I mentioned.
Ke ngoku kukho apha kuncwadi esiganeko into esiyibhalileyo pha ku-11:55.
Voorzitter, dit was nadat meneer Matunjwa gevra het om vervoer te word en ons het gesê ons het nie nou voertuie beskikbaar nie.
It was after Ms. Matunjwa had asked to be transported. At that time we decided presently do not have a vehicle.
Kwangeli xesha wayecela ukusiwa pha ngenqwelo nangeli xesha sesimxelele umhlekazi uMathunjwa into yoba asinanqwelo sinayo.
En meneer Matunwa het verwys na dieselfde Mercedes-Benz Vito bussies waarin hulle vervoer was die vorige dag wat net buite kan die jock area geparkeer was.
Mr. Matunja referred to the same Mercedes-Benz Vito with which they had been transported the day before, which was parked outside the jock area.
Waye wathetha ke ngoku umhlekazi uMathunjwa ngale Benz ibizwa iVito yayipakwe ngaphandle le wayehambiswe ngayo kwemini edlulileyo.
En daar was gemeld dat die lede ontplooi is, so die lede is nie beskikbaar nie. En ek het vir kolonel Scott dink ek en toe via hom met brigadier Tseluani gepraat en gevra dat hy reël.
He was told that the members deployed were not there. I then spoke to Colonel Scott and Brigadier Tseluani.
Samqinda uba abantu babethunyelwe apho babengekho ngoku sathetha ke noColonel Scott kunye noBrigadier Tseluani.
En die voorvalle boek inskrywing is die terugvoer wat gegee was en ek haal dit aan.
The occurrence book entry is the report feedback received thereof, and I quote.
Situation report, Brigadier Tseluani reported that the president of AMCU just left the base on his own to visit the group at the Koppie, and he left the rest of the group of AMCU behind, and the Lonman branded combi with other members of AMCU drove to the Koppie, and Captain Seleke of Mobile Operations escorted them.
Ke ngoku uthi ke ngoku kubhaliwe kule ncwadi yesiganeko into kubana ke ngoku wazihambela apho kubhalwe uBrigadier Tseluani wazihambela upresident apho ehamba ngokwakhe kwaye washiya iqala lakhe ngasemva kodwa abamlandelayo ngaba babizwa abecandelo be-mobile operations.
Ms. Barnes, I've been asked to adjourn at 12:30. You'll obviously not get to finish your cross-examination before 1 o'clock anyway, I wouldn't have thought. So I'm just mentioning that to you because you might want to bear that in mind and, from now until the time we adjourn.
Yes, that's good to know.
Framing of your question.
General, before we get to the issue of the transport, I want to put to you, because this is what we're going to argue, that two things should have happened. There should have been an urgent attempt to get hold of Lonman to find out what their position was and why they appeared to be reneging. But secondly, Mr. Matunjwa should not have been permitted to go to the Koppie to deliver bad news to strikers who you said were belligerent. There are 2 points there, not just the one. I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment if you wish.
Let's concentrate on the second point first, if you'll forgive me, Ms. Barnes. In retrospect, again, I say that in retrospect, is there not something to be said for the proposition that Mr. Matunjwa, in the light of what he told you and the Provincial Commissioner, was effectively going to try to carry out Mission Impossible? Because he effectively said that there'd been this reneging, and that obviously would have made it very difficult for him to have carried out his commitment to try to persuade the strikers to lay down their arms. So there's that part of the question, and then when you've dealt with that, Ms. Barnes will repeat the other half, and carry on.
Into ofuna ake ngoku ayijongisise ngoku phambi baphendule imbuzo lo kaMs Barnes into yokuba ngenxa yoba ke ngoku aba baselomini baye barhoxa kule nto le nto ke wayezofuna uyicela abantu baba bayenze umhlekazi uMathunjwa uyayibonakala into yokuba yayingenawuphumelela na kuthiwa makaphendule leyo kuqala.
Voorzitter, ja, maar in die gesprek tussen generaal Mbombo en meneer Matunjwa, nadat hy aangedui het hy gaan dit oordra aan die werkers.
The discussion between General Mbombo and Mr. Matunjwa, after he had mentioned that he was going to take this message over to the strikers.
Ke ngoku ingxoxo yaphakathi phakathi koGeneral Mbombo nomhlekazi uMathunjwa emva baye baxela into yobana ke ngoku uyoba nendibano kunye nabaqhankqalazi.
Hy gesê hy ken sy verantwoordelikhede as 'n leier.
He was told he knows his responsibility as a leader.
Waxelela into yoba kaloku uyalazi uxanduva lwakhe ukuba luyintoni njengenkokheli.
Voorzitter, maar in retrospect, ja, daar's baie goed wat ons kon gedoen het.
But in retrospect, Mr. Chairperson, there are many things that we could have done.
Xa sijonga kumacala onke ke le nto zininzi izinto ekufuneka zenzekile apho.
En sekerlik kon die polisie die tussenganger gewees het om te sê Matunjwa bly hierso, ons gaan nou met Lonman skakel, kom ons 3 partye kom bymekaar en ons bespreek dit.
As liaison, we could have said to Matunjwa, wait here, we will go to talk to Lonman and bring about a discussion.
Ke nje sasitheke ngoku thina besinokwazi into basithi siya ukuba nendibano okanye sicala umnxeba baselomini ukwenzela sikwazi ukuba nengxoxo nabo ngesithethe into enjalo umhlekazi uMathunjwa.
Voorzitter, in my interaksie meneer Matunjwa, dit was basies geweest voordat hulle vertrek het Koppie toe die aand van die 15 nadat hulle teruggekom het.
My interaction with Mr. Matunjwa was the evening of the 15th when they went up to the copy and came back?
Ndaba nendibano nomhlekazi uMathunjwa ngomhla we-15 ngalamini babeye phaa entabeni baphinde babuya kwakhona.
En dan ook die oggend is hy het oorgekom as 'n baie verantwoordelike persoon.
Also the morning, so he appeared to be quite a responsible person.
Na ngalantsasa wabonakala njengomntu ke onenkathalo.
En ten spyte daarvan dat hy nie baie gelukkig was, soos hy gesê, die manier wat die provinsiale kommissaris met hom gepraat het nie.
Despite the fact that he showed he was quite unhappy about the manner in which the provincial commissioner had addressed him.
Na ngaphandle kwalento ba wayebonakala engayivuyelanga indlela wathetha ngayo kuye ukommissioner lo wephondo.
Is daar nie emosionele uitbarstings van hom nie en ja, ons moes dit gedoen het, maar op daai stadium het ek geglo dat hy as 'n leier sal hy gaan en hy sal die korrekte ding gaan doen.
There were no emotional outbursts for him. I believe that as a leader he would go out there and try and bring the emotions down.
Akho zange avela qabhuke ke ngenxa yomsindo kodwa ke ngicimba ba njengokuba beyinkokheli benohamba pha ayowudambisa ke imeko.
Be appropriate for us to adjourn on that note.
It would be, Chair.
And to continue on Monday morning at 10 o'clock with this point with which you're now busy. The Commission will now adjourn until 10 o'clock on Monday.
Sigqibile ke namhlanje siyawudibana kwakhona ngomvulo ngentsimbi ye10 nibe nempela veki emnandi.